So it is time for Top Story then, and the Israeli Defence Minister Ehud Barak has given the army 1 month to prepare to conscript ultra-Orthodox Jews after a law exempting them expired at midnight just gone. In February, the Supreme Court ruled the Tal law, under which seminary students can defer military service, unconstitutional. It said a revised law should be drafted by the end of July, but the political parties have failed to reach agreement on that. And the debate over this issue really a reflection of a wider one over the country's evolving identity and who has the power, secular authorities or the religious establishment. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by our International Affairs editor, Annette Young. Annette, to begin with then, what was the background to this law that allowed ultra-Orthodox Jews to be exempt from army service?
Stuart, it goes back to the founding of Israel, where the country's leaders decided to exempt some 400 young ultra-Orthodox men from serving in the army. And this was allow them to study the Bible, the Torah as it's known, in seminaries or yeshiva as they're known. It was also out of respect of of those millions of Jews who had died in the Holocaust. Now, it went on to become known as the Tal law, and it also allowed these ultra-Orthodox Jews to claim welfare benefits in order for them to keep studying without having to work. And I'll come back to this in a moment as to why that alone sticks in the throats of many secular Israelis. Now, just to remind people, Stuart, that it is obligatory in Israel for all Israeli Jews from the age of 18 to serve in the army, 3 years for young men and 18 months for young women, and they serve reserve duty as well into their 40s. Of course, this doesn't include Palestinians with Israeli citizenships who do not serve, and that's another issue. Anyway, so the law expired at midnight last night. As you said, the Supreme Court had already ruled that this law was unconstitutional, and the ultra-Orthodox are using their power in the Knesset and also within the coalition. And what they've done is they've effectively split the coalition apart over this contentious issues. Now, to buy some time, the Israeli Defence Minister is saying that he's giving the army a month or so to see how they can prepare to draft ultra-Orthodox Jews into the army. Now, in the meantime, the Israeli Prime Minister, because it is a very, very contentious issue, keeps saying, you know, there's nothing to worry about. Let's just take a listen to what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say.
There's no vacuum, there's a law. There's a new law about equal service. The Israeli military will decide whom to draft, how many to draft, and it will draft, and I will give my support.
Does say an awful lot, doesn't it, about the ongoing debate about the country's direction and what kind of nation Israel wants to be, really.
It really does, and it's the country is struggling to balance between the obligations of the religious and also those who are secular-minded, and the privileges that are granted to the Haredim, or God-fearers, as you translate that from Hebrew into English, or ultra-Orthodox, is really known to infuriate secular Israelis, and it is dividing the country. The hostility of the ultra-Orthodox in return towards secular Jews is also very toxic. Let's just take a listen to what this secular Jewish woman had to say at a recent protest about this whole controversial issue.
Everyone should give something back to their country. It doesn't necessarily mean going to the army. They can do national service or serve their communities. That goes for the ultra-Orthodox and Arab minorities too. Everyone should contribute according to their ability.
Now, the split, Stuart, is also dividing the country economically. As I was saying, a lot of these young men, there's roughly around 60,000 of them, so we're not talking about a particularly small number, especially when you see that the country's population is around 7 million, are not working. They're studying. Now, despite all of this, Israel has done remarkably well. By contrast, its GDP per person is more than 10 times of Egypt, its nearest neighbour. But the inequality and the social strains are growing between Jewish Israelis. And again, the other sort of big issue is the army in terms of wanting to get everybody to serve. Now, last year, about 17% of 18-year-old ultra-Orthodox Jews served in the army, compared with about 75% of other Jewish men at the same age. And it's a problem that's continuing to grow because the ultra-Orthodox, while at the beginning of the state's history was a very tiny minority, they're now the fastest growing sector in the population. 26% of Jewish children entering kindergarten this year are ultra-Orthodox, so it can give you some idea of how this demographic issue is going to become more of a problem for those army officials.
Some people saying as well the religious minority has found its voice, though, and not afraid to use it, not just on this issue, but on others as well.
Well, this is just it. I mean, when you look about and talk about those figures, I mean, it's a growing segment of the Israeli society. Now, anybody who knows Israel knows it's a very fragmented place, you know, many different shades of orthodoxy. And so, of course, just to stress at this point, we're talking about the ultra-Orthodox, but they are growing in numbers, and we've seen them push on issues such as segregation on public bus routes. For instance, in 1999 there were no segregated buses. That's where women sit at the back and men sit at the front. Nowadays there's roughly around 90 bus routes in the country. It gives you some idea of their economic power as such, you know, and they're starting to find their voice. They're finding their voice in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. They're knowing how to use their voice and to use it as a powerful lobby group. So if anything, there's widening clashes between the secular Jews and the Orthodox Jews means these days, as The Economist writes, one of the greatest dangers to Jews in their homeland as Middle East is not from outside, but actually from within.
Annette, thanks very much. Annette Young, our International Affairs Editor here on France 24.